Okay, we're back again. So hopefully we get this recorded properly. Yesterday, the 1 o'clock class, I think it aborted partway through. So hi, I'm Paul Dixon. I'm the instructor for this course, and I'm teaching all the sections of the course, and I'm using this technology Top Hat. So uh, this is a different sort of class in the Management Science 1206 most students take in the winter term. So in the fall term, we've got quite an interesting group. I know there's a large group that are transfer students from the community college, Nova Scotia Community College, and they typically will take the class in the fall. There's a significant number of international students that I know started in January, and so they're out of sequence. There are a number of students that are just trying to catch up and resequence their program. It's a very diverse group of students. And so I think people can hear me, and that's what I'm getting from the chat that's down in the right-hand corner there. And all the chat is saved, and my understanding is it's going to be saved for the whole term, so you can actually scroll back forever. It's a new technology for me, one I'm still struggling to learn. I've been working at it all summer, but I'm a slow learner. And if you have technical problems, please try contacting support@tophat.com. If you don't get a reply within a day, I want you to copy me on your email, and I'm going to start getting after them as well. This is, I think, the first time anyone at St. Mary's has used this platform, and so the and Top Hat would like to have other instructors using it. So I think it gives me some leverage in getting them to ensure that we get good quality service. And we'll evaluate as to how well this technology works. I had the impression it might be better for teaching an fully online class than Brightspace, which is a technology that we've been using uh, on campus for a couple of years now. So now I'm going to go directly into my slides. That these you'll be able to review afterwards, but for me to present them, I've got to sort of hide them from you in terms of you being able to download. But once the class is over, I'll change that, and you should be able to download the slides if you want them. So let's get started. So I'm not going to take attendance. I'll try doing that next week and see how it works. I'm going to start the presentation, and I'm still not sure how this works. I'm going to move that over there so I can just see your chat over on the side. So, and again, I do want to welcome you to St. Mary's, or welcome you back to St. Mary's. I'll explain a bit about myself shortly, but I've always found it, or at least the last 30 years at least, a privilege to be able to teach you. You chose St. Mary's, you chose the Sobey School, and so I should be thankful for that. And you didn't choose my class; most of you had to take it. But I am glad that you're here. So let's see if I get to the next slide. It works. Yesterday, sometimes it changed slides and sometimes it didn't. So before I get going, I want to start in with a question. And this class is at 8:30. And normally an 8:30 class, yes, Yasmin, I'll talk about the quiz shortly, and we'll get to that. And you definitely can send me emails. That an 8:30 class is usually the least popular time slot, but our class has been, it filled up very quickly once it was clear that everything was going to be online. And so, at least from email correspondence with some students, I believe some of you are not here in Halifax, you're somewhere else in the world. And at 8:30 in the morning here, I believe it's 8:30 in the evening in China. It's probably somewhat earlier than that in Bangladesh and so on around the world. But many of our midday and afternoon classes, which are normally popular, are probably at very awkward times for students that are elsewhere in the world. So I'd like to know where you are. So Top Hat allows me to pose questions, like even tests I can do live during a presentation. And so here's the question. So I've sort of limited the responses to a small number. That it says on the screen that you can text an answer. You should also be able to click on your screen, and it doesn't track who you are. I'm just trying to get a sense of whereabouts are you at the moment. So if you could, we'll let this sit here for 1 minute, and we'll have an idea of how many students are here. And Esther, you're here. Excellent. Esther and I have been emailing for some time, and I'm quite pleased that she's with us. She's had significant technical problems getting registered. So I'm going to stop this now. Well, I'll give it a few more seconds, and we'll see where everybody is, because it comes up with a summary for me. So say I'm tried this for the first time yesterday morning, and some of these sorts of things I can build them in advance, but I don't know what they're going to look like until they go live. So what have we got? So it's closing the submissions, and should tabulate the results. There they are. So almost everybody's in Halifax. Oh, okay. Or you're in the region. But we do have 6 of you that are in China. And I don't know if you're new to St. Mary's, or if you left in the spring and have not come back when you left with COVID. But if you haven't seen Nova Scotia and Halifax, you'll probably see little bits of it in my presentation. And so we'll see it in just a minute. So Esther just emailed me. Okay. A little bit of background on the course and about me. That the course, Management Science 1206, it's been around for about 50 years, slightly different number in the past. During its first 25 years of existence, it was a very light calculus course for business students, very much like you'll find at almost every business school in Canada. It's very common to have a elementary differential and maybe integral calculus course. That and still today, most schools have that. About 25 years ago, we reduced the calculus content. We cut it in half and just did differential calculus. If I'm speaking Greek to you, don't worry, that it's not important. And we added probability to the course, just because we wanted more space for that. And a year ago, I, without permission, which I sometimes do things that way, I went and changed the course completely. And I'll explain why soon. And so I threw out all the calculus. Why? When we threw out half of it 25 years ago, that we found students weren't using it in the rest of their commerce program, and the little bit they were using was in an economics course. We retained that, and even that seems to be disappearing as well. And it's only for a small number of students that are majoring in economics that seem to need it. Economics is reteaching the material anyway. So the question is it valuable to you if it's not using the rest of your program? And graduates tell us that they don't use it in the workplace. It seems to be a traditional legacy. It's just something that 50 years ago, it was felt everybody needed, and they've just kept it out of habit. We'll talk about habit shortly. But in the last 20 years in particular, there has been incredible change. It's been very much driven by the internet and technology, and how rapidly technology has changed. And the last 20 years in particular has seen the most dramatic change, and it has to do with data. That we're capturing massive, massive amounts of data that we never captured before. And before even all the data that we had, we didn't have the computing ability to explore it. And now firms are exploring all of that data, and they're making use of it, and it's affecting the way you live your life every day. The way you interact, particularly online and social media, anything you're doing online, is being affected uh, by the way firms are using this data. And, and I'm not talking just on a computer, I'm talking also on your phone and things you're doing with apps on your phone that you may not realize it's happening to you. So I radically changed the course for fall of 2019. Uh, this is the third time I'm teaching it, and that I rewrote all the material over the summer months based upon what I learned from the fall and winter. Not that the content changed, but maybe the way I'm presenting it is slightly different than what I did last year. And because of COVID, um, they were not doing it face to face and making changes over the summer months to adapt to an online environment, which is new for me. This is a lot of change for me, and I'm probably going to fumble and make mistakes along the way. I'd ask that you be patient. And I know you're dealing with an awful lot of stress and change, and I'll try to be as patient with you as I can. So, who am I? I've been at St. Mary's for just over 40 years. This is my 42nd year, I think. I started in 1979. That uh, I had done a Bachelor of Arts in the um, in in statistics, which is an unusual thing to do a Bachelor of Arts in a mathematical subject, and statistics was a brand new major at the time. I did that at the University of New Brunswick and in Fredericton, and then went and did a master's in mathematics in statistics at the University of Waterloo. And while there, discovered a department of management science in engineering and switched there for my PhD and did work in um, manufacturing processes and how to improve the way manufacturing is done. And so uh, you'll note I have not done a business degree. I did do one course in economics, sort of, and one course in organizational behavior. But I came to St. Mary's and to the business school in particular for several reasons. One, I'd heard of the business school here when I was an undergraduate at New Brunswick, that it was definitely famous within the region. It was known as being the best business school in Atlantic Canada by a wide margin. It was also known as the best school for basketball and for football. But anyway, those are other things. That no, I'm not an athlete. um, it was also coming home in that my parents when I started at UNB, had relocated from Montreal to Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. And my wife's family traces its roots back to the 1700s in Lunenburg County in Nova Scotia. So all her family was here. So this was coming back to family. Um, you can see Dora's down here. I'll introduce her in a minute. um, that it was also a tight job market at the time. And there were very few opportunities, very few in Canada. In the US, uh, I could have gone to the University of Alabama, but I really didn't want to go there. But otherwise, there even weren't many jobs there. So I came here, joined the business school, uh, and I initially was a fairly good researcher. But oh, okay, Dora, you can get down. That, but not a very good teacher. My students helped me though. They helped me learn how to teach, and I listened to them. And I think I've gotten to be reasonably good at it. You can check online and find reviews of me, I'm sure. They But partway into my career, I got drafted into administration, first as a department chair, then the associate dean running the undergraduate business program, and then as the dean of the business school. It seems strange to be the dean of the business school not having a business background. I did that for 8 years off and on, got to do some really exciting things, develop some nice new programs. I got to build the Sobe building, and uh, they, I went back to teaching full time and then got drafted back into administration, into a new role of Associate Vice President of Enrollment, where I oversaw all of our student recruitment and admissions. So it's like a marketing sales job. And I also oversaw the academic operations, and I was registrar. So all of the student information system, the banner system that you register for classes in, convocations, graduations, um, the student financial aid, paying your fees, student accounts, all of those sorts of things came under me. And again, we made a lot of change. My area of interest was in operations management, business processes. And so what I had studied as a student in improving manufacturing processes, I applied to how to improve service processes. And then 3 years ago, I got fed up and came back to teaching full time. Through all of those years, I've been teaching at least one course on a part-time basis. That's generally been your Quant 1 course. And that was a course, the course you, if you took it here, was a course I designed about 15 years ago. That in my break between being a dean and being associate VP. And when I came back, I found that courses didn't look, they looked like they did 25 and 50 years ago. And that's what pushed me to make the change in this one, because the course that you've got is one that fits the type of work that I was doing in terms of analyzing data and informing my decisions and actions based upon data and what we see in organizations everywhere today. So my next slide, am I going to get it? This, I said I'd show you a little bit about Halifax. This is this morning when taking Dora for her walk. If you haven't been to Halifax, if you've gone to Vancouver, it's similar in that Halifax is on a peninsula. On one side is the busy main harbor, and on the other side of the peninsula is a back harbor, and where it's more recreational. In Vancouver, it's Kitsilano Beach and that sort of area, very attractive. And in Halifax, it's the same way. This morning is a very foggy day. The harbor itself is very dense fog. You could hear the foghorns blaring. But on the backside, the northwest arm, it was all very quiet and peaceful, but pretty dark. And this is Dora. Dora came to us in the spring when, I must say, I was in a very depressed mood, dealing with COVID, dealing with the passing of a previous dog of ours. I don't know how you dealt with COVID, but initially and it's still the case, I found it very, very difficult, disrupting my life and the structure of my life. I need a very structured life. And so Dora has been my therapy, and she's been a great addition. Um, and you'll see her pop up throughout the term probably. And I'm also assisted by two others that may make appearances sometimes. On the left there is Sam, and the right is Bruce. That where I'm talking from right now is a spare room. I'm looking out a window. I have a little table pushed against the window. Um, and the cats like to climb up on the table and sit on the windowsill, sometimes sit on my computer, and they make appearances as well. But they don't seem to come in when Dora's here with me. You'll see them along the way, and you'll see other bits of my family, no doubt, through the course. This is a different world. I'm working from home, so this is my classroom. So there have been some questions about some activities within the course, and I'm going to walk through those. So everything is online. There's no final exam. The grading is spread pretty evenly over the 12 weeks of the term. And I'm going to keep you busy, but hopefully not too busy each week. But I'll have you do little bits of work every week. And I hope it's modest amounts of work. If it gets to be too much, let me know, and we'll make adjustments along the way. So over the summer, I worked with Top Hat to take text material I had, which I was rewriting, and create it into a new book that's 12 chapters, one for each week. The chapters are some are heavier than others, but and so at the moment, you can just see chapter 1. I'm going to release chapter 2 this afternoon, and probably every Thursday we'll release the chapter that'll be started at the latter part of the next week. And we'll do half the chapter on Thursday and do the second half of the chapter on Tuesday. And that'll be our routine week after week after week. Reason why I'm releasing it slowly was at a suggestion of one of my previous students, or a couple of them actually. I emailed my previous students to ask them about their experience with online classes and what they liked and didn't like. And a couple remarked that when they started the course and they were just overwhelmed by all the material that was posted there. It was a huge amount. We're having a folder for each week, and every week there's tons of stuff within it. And they had a panic attack at the start of the term and asked, could it would be nicer if I would release things in small pieces, bite-sized pieces, and that they'd have enough to see what was coming at them, but not so much that they got unnerved by it. And actually, that's a common way of doing problem solving and attacking large projects is we break it up into very, very small pieces. We organize the pieces and then we start addressing them in sequence. And we can, small pieces are manageable, but seeing the whole thing can be terrifying. We aren't going to do project management within the course, but that's a key aspect of managing very, very large projects like construction projects or IT projects or other types of major change ones. At the end of each chapter, there is a quiz. And most of the time, it's going to be 10 multiple choice questions. There are two chapters that I have fewer questions because there wasn't as much in the chapter. But they'll all be worth 2 points each chapter. And I want you to, we will cover part of the chapter on Thursday, and then on Saturday, I want you to do the quiz on the whole chapter, and we'll cover the balance of the chapter on Tuesday. So you'll be doing the quiz before we've covered everything in class. But the quiz questions should not be too difficult, and they're open book, so you can actually scroll backwards and look for the answer. And you get 2 tries at each question. So you try question 1 and it says, nope, wrong answer. You could scroll back, look through the text, find the right answer, and then do the question again. The intent here is to give you an incentive to read the chapter. And it's like training Dora. I give her lots of treats and encourage her to do a particular activity and reward her for that, because it's important she does the activity to be able to learn things eventually. So 20% of your grade is based upon this initial teaching, learning phase, and it should be easy points for you to earn. Uh, 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 Many of you have already done the quiz and already submitted it, and the grades are like 9 or 10 out of 10. That I think I made the points for each question half a point just for trying it, and half a point for getting the right answer. So that won't be the case towards the end of the course, but initially I want you to try at the very least, and we'll reward those efforts. My interest here is much more in uh, encouraging you to learn, and you need to read the material in advance to get the most out of things. Whoops, wrong thing. So the next one. We'll also have tests. So there isn't a final exam, but there will be 5 tests, one every 2 weeks. There'll be 6 points each. Each one will cover 2 chapters. And those will be on Fridays that you can do it anytime during the day. I haven't tried this feature of Top Hat, but I hope it works. So whatever time is convenient for you to do it, but you'll have a fixed time to get it completed. Again, I think it's open book. I'm not sure exactly how they structure tests. I have not explored that fully. I am worried about the technology with this, of students getting in, starting a test, and then the technology crashing on them or something of that nature. So we're going to do a trial run next week with a test worth nothing, but is just to get you to test that module, and it will give me some feedback about how we can do these. The format of the questions of the test won't all be multiple choice. That I'd like to have some word answer type questions. Some you'll have to do some calculations in potentially, but there's not going to be a lot of calculation. that I don't want you doing things by hand, because most of the time at work we don't do things by hand except simple stuff, that we use Excel for everything. And that's what we're going to be doing in this course. So, I keep pressing the wrong button. I'm also going to have a thing called discussions. Will all quizzes be on Saturday? Yes. But you can always do the quiz. You could do the quiz today and submit your stuff today. You can submit anytime. Just get it in before midnight, Halifax time on Saturday. So you're welcome to do it early, and I would recommend that you try to get the quiz done early if you can. But the course, in many respects, is going to be as flexible as possible so that you can adjust your work schedule and that type of thing to it. We do have some students that are doing this course asynchronously because they're working full time. And again, with them, if the timing I'm setting up doesn't work for that, let me know and we can make some accommodations. I'm a very flexible person in terms of doing things. I just want you to learn, and I've got to find a way of assigning you a reasonable grade. I'd like to get some interaction among you, and some of that happens during the chat, but I've posted discussions, and I haven't used discussion boards before. So I've posted a discussion board, and I'll have one for each chapter. It'll lead off with a simple question. You're encouraged to post your own questions to provoke discussion of other people. That I've posted one at the moment to ask you about data analytics in your personal life. Have you encountered it? You have. You may not have noticed it, but to think about that and tell me about your experience and your feelings about that. And you can write a whole long blog if you want, or you can give a quick answer. But to encourage you to do that type of thing. And we'll also have a separate discussion board for the assignments. And I'll talk about the assignments in a minute, that, um, that when you're struggling with a question on the assignment and you've made your best efforts to try to do question 2 and you can't figure it out, pose a question on the discussion board. Make sure it's a clear question so that people know what you're asking about. Just don't say, how do you do question 2? Be more specific. We do need to learn how to pose good questions. I've got some notes on that I've got to find. But anyway, separate from that, in uh, and I'd like other students to chime in and try to answer the questions. And halfway through the course, I'm going to go through all of those discussions, and I'm going to evaluate contributions you've made to the discussions and give you a great interim grade on that, and information on how I plan on grading future contributions to the discussions. And if you're an active participant, um, that you should get a good grade on it, and all you take your worst test grade and throw it away and put your discussion grade in its place. So anyway, um, we'll see how that works. But I've got to find a way, just like giving you an incentive to read the book through the quizzes, I'm trying to find an appropriate way to incentivize you to participate with one another in a discussion. And if you've got other ideas, I'd be welcome to hear them. So assignments, there'll be 5 of them on the alternate weeks that we have the test. That the first one will be due on the 2nd of October. I'll post it next week, what the assignment's going to be. It's going to be on material primarily from Chapter 2. That the assignments, they will mostly be Excel-based, that we'll be using Excel as much as possible through the course. In the notes, I will lay out step by step how to do things in Excel, and I hope the instructions are clear. But what I've also done is, after introducing a topic in Excel and how to do something, I followed it with a little video showing you in a live demonstration of using Excel to do it. And I'm also going to do the same type of thing in class. You'll see me using Excel a fair bit in class. I'm not presuming you have a knowledge of Excel. Many of you have a basic understanding. Excel is used in every workplace. You have to know it. It's an essential tool um, that, and you need a high comfort level in the workplace with that. I'm finding students in general don't. Employers tell me that graduates of any university don't have good comfort level with Excel. They can do the basics, but we're going to emphasize things related to data and exploring data, analyzing data, presenting information, and using tools within Excel. And you may have seen some of it in other classes. I'm going to start from scratch. What I've seen from other students is they may know how to, but they don't know why they do it. That when to do things, when not to do things, how to use it most effectively. So um, they, yeah, Esther, not everyone has a knowledge of Excel, and I am not expecting you to. Um, I'll do my best to start you from as basic as possible. And if students can't do things, then that means I have to go back and do it again. Um, that um, I have to keep repeating it in different ways until uh, until you can do it effectively. It's not your responsibility to know Excel coming in. So don't worry about that. Please do not get stressed. I'll do my best to keep stress out of this. We already have enough of that with COVID and doing online courses. And again, I'm not sure how Top Hat's going to be in terms of submitting assignments. I saw it with Brightspace, and it was challenging. But we're going to do a trial run next week of just submitting a document. So I have an idea as to how it's working, and you know as well. But we'll deal with that as we go. That uh, I mentioned here, we're going to simulate completing an actual data analytics project, and I'll give you more about that next. So later today, probably, you'll get an email from me indirectly through a program called Qualtrics. It's going to be a survey. Last fall, we did a survey of students. We did another one in the winter, and we asked students a bit about their background, about who they were, asked them about their finances, about what they were afraid of, what they liked and didn't like. It got a reasonable picture of the students. The survey in the fall, students said, was a bit long, so I shortened up the fall survey, but kept the basic wording of the questions I've retained. And I'm going to merge your responses with last year's responses, and we can potentially do some work in the assignments that will involve exploring what's different about students this fall versus students last fall. And we've seen a big change that we've got a slightly smaller class. I don't know if the composition's different, but COVID happened, and that has changed stress levels of students, it's changed finances of students, and may have changed the demographics of students. And I'm quite curious just to see what change has taken place. Last year, students did group projects where they took surveys and they were asked to pick something out of the survey and uh, write a report as if they're writing a report to the dean. And they would do things like looking at the relationship between student finances, their income, their expenses, the cost of education, and where they were from, other characteristics of them, and their level of stress, how worried they were, how depressed they were, um, how it was affecting their grades and academic performance. It was quite interesting, and some of the reports were outstanding. They were very, very, very good. But the problem with group projects was you're working in a group, and the group work was a disaster. Students found that it really detracted from the learning experience. They found the issue and the topic interesting, but dealing with their group members was not. That's not the focus of our course, so I'm not doing a group project. But the activity, I think, was quite useful in learning how to do a project from beginning to end. And we've organized the topics in the course around doing projects. How do you start a project? And in Week 12, we'll be looking at how do you convince your manager to accept the results of your project, how to write a persuasive report. So we'll work from beginning to end as we walk through the course. And I'll try to simulate that as best as I can, but without you having to do a major project. So we'll see how that goes. So today, I want to look at what is data analytics and why we should look at it, and what you should know by the end of the course. And I also want to look at one case study of Target department stores. And this gives you an idea of some aspects of data analytics. And we'll be revisiting this case study on a couple of occasions through the term. So why look at data analytics? The last 2 decades, as I said, has huge change in our ability to capture tons of data, huge amounts of data. And we can now store it, process it, analyze it. Um, that you will take a course in studying data, a course in statistics, management science 2207. It's a fairly classic statistics course, like you'll see at every university in North America. Um, but it's very much rooted in statistics the way it was applied even 30, 40 years ago, that when collecting data was very difficult, very expensive, and we couldn't store huge amounts of data. And so a lot of it has to do with how do you deal with observations on 30 employees or 30 customers. I wouldn't study 30 students. In my job as registrar, I studied samples of thousands of students at a time. If I wanted to see a relationship between students' high school performance and their performance at university, I might look at several years of data and 3,000 or 4,000, maybe 5,000 students. Uh, why would I look at only 30 or even 100 or 200? I've got lots of data, but those data sets were small. Today, we can have data sets of billions, trillions, massive amounts of data beyond anything you could possibly imagine in terms of our data sets. And we couldn't do that in the past. Uh, to give you an idea, I had probably the first hard disk. I know you don't think of hard disk, but hard disk is what stores the information inside of your computer. And you've probably got many gigabytes of storage. I bought one of the earliest ones that you could buy for a desktop, or the first actually you could buy from IBM. It could store 5 megabytes of data. Think of 5 megs. A picture could be 5 megabytes today. This monster, it weighed over 40 pounds, sat on my desk. And it cost me over $5,000. So think of $5,000 over 30 years ago. What would it be worth today? Data was really expensive to buy, and we couldn't buy very much or store very much. Now it's completely different. And the data is being captured all the time. That it's being captured from your phone. That I don't know if you heard the story that came out this week about cell phone data. And researchers have been able to access cell phone data in terms of the location information about where you are. And your cell phone is emitting that on a regular basis. And they looked at a gathering of motorcyclists in South Dakota that occurred during August. It's an annual gathering, and almost 500,000 people gathered in this town of 7,000. And everybody was terrified about how that big gathering of people not wearing masks and not social distancing, how would it affect the spread of COVID? So they took the cell phone data on those people and they identified them because their cell phone location was in South Dakota that particular 10-day period. And then they looked at their cell phone locations a week after the event. And so they saw where they scattered to across the United States. And they then looked at the change in the cases of COVID in those communities several weeks later. And they correlated that there were spikes wherever large groups of motorcyclists returned to. And none of those people knew it was going on. It was capturing their cell phone data. At the bottom of the screen, I mentioned Tim Hortons. I got to mention this one because this was a story that came out in the summer. Tim Hortons, uh, most of you are in Halifax, so you've seen Tim Hortons. It's everywhere. It's the biggest coffee shop in the coffee vendor in Canada. And there are Tim Hortons everywhere. You can't travel very far without encountering another Tim Hortons. And Tim Hortons has an app for your phone so that you can order your coffee in advance of you arriving there at Tim's and speed up the service. And the phone captures your GPS location. And so it knows when to have that coffee ready, so it's hot when you come and pick it up. They don't want to have it ready too early. But what you don't realize is it's checking your location every 15 minutes, whether you're using the app or not using the app. So it knows where you are all the time, day and night, day after day. And so if you go to Starbucks to get your coffee or a second cup to get your coffee, it knows you're there. So it knows when you're at a competing coffee shop. It knows where you live. It knows where you go to work. It knows when you're on vacation. It knows when you've traveled out of the country. It knows an awful lot about you. And from those things, it can also make other inferences. So when you signed up for the app, you may not have told yourself an awful lot about yourself, but it knows now. It's scary. I mentioned Big Brother. Big Brother's expression from a book called 1984. It was written almost 100 years ago, and it's about in the future. Well, 1984 was going to be in the future, where they know everything about you. You're always being spied on. You are now. It's here. Um, so this vast amount of data firms are using to improve services to you so that they can make more money. Or if they're a service organization, they're using that data to provide better services or more efficiently or that type of thing. And that's what data analytics is all about. As a definition, this is one that's a little bit old. Data analytics goes under many names. Data mining, you may hear of, data science. There's an old one called knowledge discovery through data, and this definition comes from that old terminology. And it was one that was described as a non-trivial process. Non-trivial means it's not simple. There's some complexity. It's a process. It's not a formula. It's not a specific tool. It's a way of doing things. A process has a beginning. It has an end. It has a middle. It has a regular set of steps that you go through to carry things out. And a lot of the course is going to focus on the process portion. Tools are easy to relearn. I just need to watch a YouTube video. But processes are things that are much harder to really grasp unless you've gone through and have a good sense of all those steps, doing it for the first time. That I think of the difference between taking a carpentry program that teaches you how to use all of the different tools you could use to build a house, but not being taught how to build a house. You know how to do all the activities, all the tasks, but you've never been taught the process of building something. The process of building is more important than the individual tools. Tools will change over time. We want to identify things that are valid so that they're true, or most of the time they're true. They're novel, they're new, they're things that we didn't know before. They're potentially useful. I've got a spelling mistake there. That we're not doing just because we're interested, although some of the things we'll do, we may explore just out of curiosity. I track COVID data just because I'm not going to be able to use it, but I'm interested in finding it. That it's ultimately understandable patterns. So we're looking for patterns in data, and fairly loosely using the term pattern. And I'm saying it's understandable. We'd like to explain the pattern. Not all times can we. There are some very popular tools called neural networks that we can't explain how they, we can explain the tool, but we can't explain the result. It's strange. With most of the stuff we'll look at, the tools we'll look at in the course, they're ones that we can explain. And that's important because if you're trying to get someone to adopt your solution, you need to explain why they should believe it. And I say it's stored in structured databases. So all that data is out there, but it's often loose, it's free form sort of thing. And we'd like to take it and we need to uh, put some structure around it so that we can apply our tools to analyze it. Like unstructured data might be email messages. They're not really structured, but if we can organize them in some fashion, in a structured fashion, in a database, then we can start drilling into your email messages. And the CIA does that all the time. They're monitoring U.S. emails constantly, trying to identify um, spying, and they're spying to do spying on the spies. So at the end of the course, I want you to have a basic understanding of the process, and that's my biggest priority. Um, I want you to know how to do problem solving from start to end. In your Quant 1 course that you took, you saw a little bit of process, but you saw a lot of tools. But um, trying to understand how do you, if you did Quant 1, you did linear programming, understanding how do you start one of those sorts of problems and how do you know you finished it? Uh, that the process is what's there. I want you to be aware of many of the most common applications of data mining. And that's important so that you have a sense of what are the types of things you could potentially do. So even if you're not doing the work and you're going to ask someone else to do it, what are things that are reasonable to ask them to do? You're going to be much more proficient at Excel by the end of the course in the area of data exploration and analysis. Other aspects of Excel? No, maybe. But analyzing data, it turns out, is a very common activity. It that a lot of salespeople don't use their customer database as effectively as they could. They may be keeping all their customer information in an Excel spreadsheet, but are they exploring it and mining it to find how do they find the best customers to keep relationships with? Uh, what's effective in maintaining the relationship? Which customers are good at trying to convince them to buy more? Accountants have all their data in spreadsheets. They love spreadsheets. They love Excel. So if you're in accounting, you live in Excel land. But uh, they're not very good necessarily at exploring the data. And if you're doing auditing, if you're looking for fraud, you're looking for patterns, that's data exploration. And now to become a chartered professional accountant, you need to have some understanding of data analytics. It's now a requirement in that designation. Uh, Data is generally dirty. Most of the data that we see is, don't believe all the numbers that you see there. There's errors in the data. I'll show you some of that sort of thing next week. I was looking on, say I'm interested in tracking stuff to do with COVID, and there are different websites you can go to. Johns Hopkins University, Google has their own um, uh, virus webpage where it'll give you stats on every country and you can drill into it. MSN also has a site on that. On MSN, I was looking at some of the graphs they had of number of cases over time or number of deaths over time. And for some countries, you'll see negative spikes. How do you have a negative number of deaths? It's some countries corrected reporting that they had, and so they may have overestimated the number of deaths one day, and the next day they made a revision and moved it down. And so it appeared as the daily total as being negative. Um, their data isn't perfectly clean. And if you go to the different websites, you actually get slightly different data each day because their methods for collecting the information is different. There's a lot of quality issues, and you need to appreciate that. And that's going to be a recurring theme throughout the term. We're going to look at two of the most common applications of data mining, and we'll look at them in the case study in just a minute. One of them is called value estimation, and the other one is called classification. Classification is trying to determine, is this a fraudulent credit card transaction or is this a valid credit card transaction? And some of you may have had your credit cards rejected when you were trying to register for the course. That's because the bank was using a classification tool to guess whether or not your credit card was valid or not valid. I'll tell you about my experience with the bank, TD Bank, and their mistakes on classification on credit card transactions. Value estimation is predicting a number. It's like trying to predict how many gigabytes of data you might use on your cell phone in the coming month, um, trying to predict a number. And all of these sorts of things, probabilities in the background, understanding risk, variability, and that sort of thing, and how it affects your decision making. So those are the key things you'll be learning in the course. So what I'm going to do now, and I hope this works this time, is I'm going to play a video. If not, doesn't work. We've had trouble with the audio and the video. And you see if I've figured out how to get it working properly now. So I'm going to start it, right? Connect this.
You send this to my daughter, he asked. The ad contained all these coupons for baby clothes and bottles and formula and cribs. She's still in high school and you're sending her ads for baby clothes? He screamed at the manager. Are you trying to encourage her to get pregnant? The store manager apologized. A few days later, called the guy to apologize again. The father was somewhat abashed. It turned out there's been some activities in my house that I wasn't aware of. I had a long conversation with my daughter. She's due in August. It turns out I owe you. Target had created a computer that could figure out which shoppers were right just by studying their shopping habits. Identifying clearly is the whole grail. People with new babies are so tired that if you can get them inside your doors to buy bottles of blood, they'll end up buying anything else they need as well. If a new starts shopping with right, they'll keep coming back. So how did Target start working? For the baby run, lots of people buy them. But Target data analysts noticed that people that are Target's baby registry started buying period in about their second trimester. Someone else noticed that in another 23, everyone started one by by crawl through the data. Target was able to identify about 25 different items that, when analyzed together, would allow them to predict if someone was pregnant. Target's program was so accurate that it could assign almost any regular shopper a pregnancy predictions. With the problem with all this data, as the father in Minnesota demonstrated, is that Target couldn't let on how much they knew. After all, shoppers might get a little bit upset if they received an advertisement making it clear that Target was studying their product. So how did Target solve this problem? It started mixing ads for bottles, formula, with other as a result, it started using the Target's mom the story. The lesson had to choose to shape our habits ourselves, or to someone else shape them.
So hopefully you can hear me again. Are you able to hear that and see it? Someone could just give me something on chat. Yesterday, it wasn't working at all. Sound was glitchy. Yeah. Okay. That I'd encourage you to, and I also run into the problem that now it seems to mess up my presentation. Let me just see if I can get this out of the way and go to the next slide and get back to my presentation. Do, 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 do. Okay. So in the text, there's a link to the video and also to the story. And I'm sorry you couldn't hear it very well. I, I'm going to retell the story, and I'll try to do this as quickly as I can. So in 2002, some marketing people at Target department stores, and Target is a large chain, sort of like Walmart. It used to be in Canada, but was unsuccessful here and left us. But they went into, they had a statistics department at Target. They went into this new statistician, Andrew Pohl, and asked him a question that was, if we wanted to figure out if a customer was pregnant, even if she didn't want to tell us or didn't want us to know, can you actually do that? So can we find out which of our customers are pregnant? They actually wanted to know which customers were in their second trimester of a pregnancy. So that's between the 4th and 6th months of the pregnancy. That uh, interesting question. Why would they want to know? It's because customer shopping behavior is really difficult to change. Most of our habits are very, very, very difficult to change. Uh, Keeping calculus in a business program seems to be something that's hard to change. Uh, but if you've ever tried to lose weight, try to change your behavior, that sort of thing, it's really, really, really hard. Um, but with shopping, there are certain times when when you go through major life changes that you become more receptive to changing your habits, in part because you have to. And one of them is having a baby. That and uh, Stores know that, and so when births are announced and they're public record, that those new mothers will get sent all kinds of marketing material. Uh, at least in the U.S., that's the case. Um, but what Target wanted to do was try to approach those families before the baby was born, so they would get an advantage over other retailers. And because it was a time people changed the way they shop, or at least they were more open to that type of thing. So that was their business opportunity. Can we change shopping behavior? That uh, They approached it and they wanted as a data analytics problem. And so often we have to work with a client a while to get a good understanding. Well, what do you want exactly? And what the marketing people wanted was, can you just give us a list of all of our current target customers that you think are in the second trimester of pregnancy? That was the deliverable. That was the thing and then they would go and use that in some fashion. It's important for the analyst to have a sense of how they plan on using it, and probably could have warned them, you're going to creep out your customers by sending them things and spying on them, or thinking that, how do you know this? Um, and so the analysts really should engage the client in terms of understanding not just what's the deliverable, but how you're going to use it. What's the action that's going to go with that? Have a full discussion of that. And that's where we generally start, is this back and forth, trying to understand what they're really trying to achieve, rather than sometimes they'll ask for data, but they don't understand how they're going to use it. And so they may be asking for the wrong data. So it's important for an analyst to have that type of conversation, or when you're having the conversation with an analyst, to, can you express what it is that you really want and what you're going to do with it? And that's where we think problems begin. Um, in This one, there were many actors, and it's important at the beginning to think of who's going to be involved. And so there's the marketing people, there was the statistician, but also the store manager got involved. Customers become involved. And thinking about different roles that they may have to play and thinking about those types of things because it may be important for a successful implementation. You may need to get buy-in from these different sorts of groups, and you think about those issues at the start. You may want to redefine things uh, if you feel that that's not going to be appropriate. Um, I'll talk next week. I'll repeat a case of I was asked, could I predict which first-year students were going to go on to graduate and who wasn't? And eventually found a simple way of at least identifying a large block that had a high probability of graduation and a large block that had a very low probability of graduation. And I knew that uh, by Christmas of their first year. And so potentially I could contact those students in January and say, uh, why are you still in classes that they it's very unlikely you're ever going to complete a degree at St. Mary's. So why don't you save your money and stay home? I couldn't predict that exactly. And there are a lot of those students would go on to graduate. It was unethical to actually go and use that thing. That in terms of the business action and the consequences, once you explore it, we actually dropped the project, or I convinced others not to pursue it. And I never told them how I was able to identify successful and unsuccessful students. You have to look at what sort of data you've got, and do you have the appropriate data? And sometimes you don't. Target couldn't predict pregnant women that were not target customers because it only had data on target customers. So that's out of the question. But um, for this, they have to have a sense of what have they got to work with. And the only data they've got on pregnancy, actually, is those that are in a baby registry. And so many pregnant women will sign up for a baby registry so that, and in the registry, they identify items that they need for when the baby comes. And so when friends are thinking, can I buy you a gift for the new baby or to help you out with the new baby, they can go to the baby registry and see what those are. And so they've got that data where they know of uh, pregnant customers, not just right now, but they can look at historical data over the last number of years as to who signed up for the baby registry. And they can look at all of the shopping data associated with them. That's a huge amount of data. It would be a massive job to figure out which data to use because the target had just got so much. So when they said that they, in the video, you may have heard that they found 25 products that were relevant, it must have taken them ages to sift through that data to find those 25 nuggets to work with. They don't tell us what sort of model they used, and models take on a lot of different form, and sometimes they have many different forms. They may use multiple models. They could be a formula. They could be a set of formulas. They could be some rules. There are all kinds of different things, and we'll see, particularly when we get into classification models, that there are a lot of very creative approaches people have taken to trying to make predictions. That we have to have a sense of what success looks like. How good do the predictions have to be? That it may be that they don't have to be perfect. Even if they could identify a large proportion of the customers that are pregnant, even any of the customers that are pregnant, that would help them with their sales situation. But as we'll see later, sometimes we can have a model that has a very, very high predictive rate. That um, it could be that if we had a test, and there's a common one that they used to use for men like myself to predict prostate cancer, a PSA blood test that had a very high prediction rate. So like 90% of those people that a positive test result had um, had prostate cancer. But unfortunately, there was a large number that didn't have prostate cancer. They were getting a lot of false positives and doing surgery on people that didn't need surgery. So they've stopped using that test and using other approaches now. So even if it's right most of the time, that may not be good enough. And we've got to think through about implementation and deployment. That the uh, like that case in Minneapolis, that it can be quite, we can creep out our customers. How are we going to use this? Who's going to use it? And it may be that we have to train people, convince people. You may have the best idea, but people don't want to use the advice you're giving them. That COVID, when we have a vaccine, how do we convince people to use that vaccine, even if it's a perfect vaccine? Many people will be skeptical, and so you need a strategy for implementation at the end. What disturbs me is this story. It started in 2002. I think they started actively using this information in 2004. The article came out in 2012, and this is 2020. So what they could do 15 and 20 years ago was quite good. What can they do today? It's terrifying, but this is what we've got. Um, the um, there is before I forget, there's a question here from Cleo. The questions at the end of the chapter, is that the quiz? Yes, it is. So complete those questions, hit submit, and you're done. That's all you have to do. And there's no time limit on the quiz. You can start them anytime. As far as I know, there's no time limit. If you do find that comes up, get after me. I'll fix it. I just want it done by midnight on Saturday. So think about what, as a business graduate, you need to know to function effectively in this environment. It doesn't mean you need to be a data analyst. That's not my objective here. You'd need a lot of courses to become proficient as a data analyst. Um, if you're going to be an accountant, if you're going to be in marketing, if you're going to be an HR manager and do hiring, you're going to be in a role where if you're going to do your job well, you're going to be looking at data. You're going to be looking at data to identify who are the right people to hire. Is this person likely to be successful or not successful in their role? And there is data to help you in doing that. Is this a good investment or a bad investment? Um, that finance people are huge users of data mining. Um, if you hear of fintech, they're using very sophisticated models to troll through all kinds of financial data and non-financial data to make recommendations on what to buy and what not to buy. Auditing is all data analytics. Fraud has become a huge area among accountants. Um, and just exploring what's going on within their firm. All that data is there, but what's it telling us? And can we find out, are we getting value for money in the organization? And marketers, they're the big ones. Yeah, that's what all that stuff to do with online social media. They're using it a massive amount of it. So how much do those, with those different majors how much do you really need to know? So you may not be the analyst, but you need to work with the analyst. You need to be able to get the most out of your analyst. And so out of this course, I'd like you to have a sufficient foundation knowledge to be able to do that. And I hope in the future we can develop more technical courses for those of you that want to dig into this in a lot more depth, um, that can help you develop skills in that. There are a lot of online courses you can take to pursue that, and there's a lot of online free tools you can use to develop your skills in this. So that's sort of where I want to go within the course, and we'll get going quite seriously next week on that process aspect for it. So, and if you've already read chapter 1, you started to see what's an overview of one of the most common processes. We call it CRISP, and the most common data applications, data mining applications, the ways that we use data. And then into chapter 2, we'll actually start working with the data from the very, very, very beginning and working with dirty data a good chunk of the time. You'll have, I hope that when you come out, you won't just have the ability to solve textbook problems like you get in most quantitative courses, but you'll have a sense of how to go out and do a real project yourself. For if you're working for a firm right now, that you could take information that they have and do a real project for them. the end of this course, you should be able to do a very elementary project for them. Anyway, you have a good weekend. You take care, and I hope the fog here eventually lifts, though it's going to be a cloudy day. But we'll see you next week. And if you have questions, please email me with the questions. The chat stays open indefinitely if you want to keep using it. But I look forward to speaking to you again next week. I'd say seeing you, but I guess I'm never going to get to actually see you face to face unless we eventually meet on campus at some future time. Take care. Have a good weekend. We'll see you. Bye.